Your father sent a stranger $1 million every month, and you never knew his name. Victoria Whitmore froze when she read the final line on her father's private banking report. The account number was not a mistake. The transfers were not random. For 14 straight months, exactly on the first day of every month, Richard Whitmore had authorized a $1 million wire to the same person. Ethan Calloway, a man Victoria had never heard of. A man who was not a business partner, not an investor, not a family friend, just a single father living in a small town 4 hours away from Boston. Victoria stared at the screen inside her father's old office, the same office where she had made billion-dollar decisions and negotiated deals that changed entire industries. She had spent the last 6 months rebuilding Whitmore Holdings after her father's sudden illness left behind unanswered questions, hidden accounts, and unfinished conversations. She thought she knew every secret her family carried. She was wrong. The strangest part was not the money. It was the note attached to the final transfer. For Lily, keep the promise you made. Victoria slowly looked up from the computer. Lily, a child's name, a promise, and a man her father had quietly supported with millions of dollars while saying nothing to his own daughter. By sunrise the next morning, Victoria was already driving north. Ethan Calloway lived far away from the world she knew. No glass towers, no private elevators, no boardrooms filled with executives waiting for her approval. The road narrowed as she left the city behind, passing farms, quiet neighborhoods, and old wooden houses surrounded by autumn trees. She expected to find someone who had taken advantage of her father's generosity, someone who lived comfortably because Richard Whitmore had been too kind to notice. Instead, she found a small woodworking shop with a faded sign that read Calloway and Daughter Restoration. Through the front window, she saw a man standing at a workbench. He wore a simple gray shirt with rolled-up sleeves, carefully repairing an old wooden chair. Beside him sat a little girl with a sketchbook in her lap, watching him work. "Dad, should I draw the chair before you fix it, or after?" the girl asked. Ethan smiled softly. "Before. That way you remember what needed saving." Victoria stopped outside the door. She did not know why that simple sentence bothered her. Maybe because it sounded nothing like someone who had secretly taken millions of dollars. The bell above the shop door rang when she stepped inside. Ethan looked up. His expression changed slightly when he saw her expensive coat, confident posture, and the unmistakable presence of someone used to being obeyed. "Can I help you?" he asked calmly. Victoria placed a printed bank record on the table between them. "My name is Victoria Whitmore. My father sent you $1 million every month." Ethan looked down at the paper. For the first time, his calm expression disappeared. The little girl looked between them, sensing the tension. "Why?" Victoria asked. "What did my father owe you?" Ethan was silent for a moment. Then he folded the paper carefully and pushed it back toward her. "Your father didn't owe me anything." Victoria narrowed her eyes. "Then why did he send you $14 million? Ethan looked toward his daughter, then back at Victoria. His voice was quiet, but his answer changed everything she thought she knew about her family. "Because 12 years ago, your father made a promise to someone he loved." Victoria felt her confidence disappear. "Who?" Ethan looked at the old photograph sitting beside his workbench. A photograph she recognized instantly. Her father was in it. But he was not alone. Standing beside him was Ethan Calloway. "Your father never told you about me, did he?" Ethan asked. Victoria could not answer. Because for the first time in her life, she realized the man in front of her was not someone her family had helped. He was someone her family had been hiding from her. The morning after Victoria Whitmore discovered the hidden transfers, she expected answers. Instead, she found more questions. Ethan Calloway did not behave like a man who had received $14 million. There was no luxury car outside the shop, no expensive watch on his wrist, no signs that his life had changed because of the money her father sent. The small wooden house beside the restoration shop looked exactly like the kind of place someone worked hard to maintain, not the home of a man connected to a fortune. Victoria stood near the workbench, watching Ethan return to the chair he had been repairing before she arrived. "You are not going to explain?" she asked. Ethan kept his eyes on the damaged wood. "I already told you. Your father did not owe me anything." "That does not answer my question. Some answers belong to the people who made the promise, not the people trying to uncover it." Victoria had spent years sitting across from executives who avoided difficult questions. She knew when someone was hiding information. But Ethan was different. He was not defensive. He was not nervous. He was simply protecting something. My father was a billionaire, Victoria said. He did not send $1 million every month without a reason. Ethan placed the wooden piece down carefully. You are right. For the first time, she heard something change in his voice. Not fear. Not guilt. Something closer to sadness. Your father had a reason. Before Victoria could ask again, a small voice came from the corner of the room. Dad, should I put the blue paint away? Lily stood holding a small container of paint beside her sketchbook. Ethan immediately turned toward her, and the serious expression he had carried with Victoria disappeared. Yes, sweetheart. Put it on the second shelf. Victoria noticed the change. The man who had calmly faced accusations about millions of dollars softened instantly when speaking to his daughter. It was not an act. It was natural. Lily walked past Victoria and smiled politely. Are you my dad's customer? Victoria looked at the little girl and paused. She had prepared herself to meet a stranger who benefited from her family's wealth. She had not prepared herself to meet a child who seemed completely unaware of any money at all. Something like that, Victoria answered. Lily looked at her father. Dad fixes things people think cannot be fixed. Ethan gave a small smile. Lily, it is true, the girl said. Last week he fixed Mrs. Harper's table. She said she was going to throw it away because it was too old. Victoria looked around the shop. Every object seemed to carry a story. Old furniture waiting for another chance. Tools carefully arranged. Drawings from Lily pinned near the wall. A life built around patience. A life completely different from the world Victoria knew. Later that afternoon, Victoria returned to Boston with a copy of the bank records and more confusion than before. She entered her father's old office and opened every file she had ignored during the past 6 months. For the first time, she was not searching for financial information. She was searching for a person. Ethan Callaway. The name appeared nowhere in the company records. No employment history. No partnership agreements. No public connection to Whitmore Holdings. It was as if he had been erased. Then she found something hidden inside an old archive folder. A photograph from 12 years earlier. Her father was standing beside a younger Ethan Callaway outside a research facility. On the back of the photograph were 6 words written in her father's handwriting. The man who saved everything. Victoria stared at the picture for a long moment. She had spent her entire life believing she understood her father. His victories. His mistakes. His empire. But now a stranger was appearing in the middle of her family's history, connected to a promise, a fortune, and a part of her father's past that she never knew existed. And when Victoria turned the photograph over again, she noticed something she had missed before. Standing beside Ethan was a woman holding a baby. A woman her father had never mentioned. A woman whose identity could explain why Ethan Callaway had been protecting a secret for 12 years. Victoria Whitmore had spent her entire life believing that powerful people controlled their own stories. Her father built an empire because he understood every number, every contract, and every person standing in his way. But now, sitting alone in his old office, she realized there was one story he had never allowed her to read. The photograph on her desk showed Richard Whitmore standing beside Ethan Callaway 12 years earlier. Beside Ethan was a woman, holding a baby. Victoria looked at the image again and again, searching for a memory that was not there. She knew every important person who had entered her father's world. She knew every executive, every investor, every family connection. But she had never heard Ethan Callaway's name. The next morning, she returned to the small town where Ethan lived. This time, she did not arrive as a CEO looking for answers. She arrived as a daughter trying to understand her father. When she stepped into the restoration shop, she found Ethan sitting with Lily at a small wooden table. They were looking through old drawings together. This one is my favorite, Lily said, holding up a picture of a large house surrounded by trees. I want to live somewhere like this someday. Ethan smiled. You can build whatever kind of life you want, Lily. Victoria stood quietly near the door, watching them. She had spent years surrounded by people who wanted something from her family name. Everyone wanted access, influence, or opportunity. But Ethan and Lily seemed completely different. They had something money could not create. They had peace. Ethan noticed her presence. You came back. Victoria nodded. I found a photograph. His expression changed slightly. Not surprise. Recognition. I thought eventually you would. Victoria placed the photograph on the table. Who is she? Ethan looked down at the woman beside him in the picture. For several seconds, he said nothing. Her name was Claire. Victoria waited. She was my wife. The answer was simple, but it carried years of emotion behind it. Your father knew her? Ethan nodded slowly. Your father knew both of us. Victoria felt the room become quieter. Why? Ethan looked toward Lily, who was carefully coloring another drawing nearby. Because 12 years ago, your father made a decision that changed 3 families. 3? Victoria asked. Ethan did not answer immediately. Instead, he walked to a small wooden cabinet and opened a drawer. Inside was a collection of old letters tied together with a blue ribbon. He did not hand them to her. He simply looked at them. Your father asked me to keep these safe. Victoria felt a strange feeling she had not experienced in years. Uncertainty. What are they? The truth, Ethan said. About what happened before Whitmore Holdings became the company you know today. Victoria stepped closer. Then why did he hide it from me? Ethan looked at her carefully. Because your father believed he was protecting you. Those words stayed with Victoria. Protecting her. Not controlling her. Not manipulating her. Protecting her. But before she could ask more, Ethan's phone rang. He looked at the screen, and his expression changed. Victoria noticed immediately. Who is it? Ethan ended the call without answering. Someone who knows the past should stay buried. Victoria looked at the old letters, then at Ethan. For the first time, she understood something important. The money her father sent was never the mystery. The real mystery was why a man like Ethan Calloway had spent 12 years protecting a secret that could change everything she knew about her family. The next morning, Victoria Whitmore arrived at Ethan Calloway's workshop before the town had fully awakened. She had spent the entire night reading through old company records, searching for any mention of Ethan, Claire, or the promise her father had made. But every search ended the same way. Nothing. It was as if Ethan Calloway had existed outside the world her family built. That was impossible. People did not simply disappear from the history of a billion-dollar company. Someone had removed him. Inside the workshop, Ethan was already working. The smell of fresh wood filled the room, and the sound of his tools moving carefully across the surface was the only thing breaking the silence. You knew I would come back, Victoria said. Ethan looked up. Yes. Why? He placed the tool down. Because once you started looking, you would not stop. Victoria almost smiled because he was right. She had built her entire career on finding what others missed. I need to see the letters. Ethan looked toward the small cabinet where they were stored. For a moment, Victoria thought he would refuse. Instead, he reached inside and placed the blue ribbon collection on the table. These belong to your father. Victoria carefully opened the first letter. The handwriting was unmistakable. Richard Whitmore. Her father's words filled the page. But they were not written like a CEO speaking to an employee. They were written like a man speaking to someone he respected. Ethan, I know no amount of money can repay what you gave up for my family. This is not payment. This is my promise. Victoria stopped reading. What did he mean by what you gave up? Ethan remained quiet. The silence itself was an answer. 12 years ago, Ethan finally said, your father was building Whitmore Holdings into something bigger than anyone expected. But success brought problems. People around him started making decisions that were not about the future of the company. They were about protecting themselves. Victoria looked at him carefully. Who? Ethan looked away. People your father trusted. The words felt heavier than she expected. Victoria had always believed her father's biggest challenge was competition. She never considered that the greatest threat could have been inside his own company. Ethan continued. Your father discovered that someone was trying to take control of important parts of the business without his knowledge. I helped him uncover the truth. And then? Victoria asked. Ethan looked toward Lily, who was sitting nearby drawing quietly. Then my life changed. Victoria followed his eyes. She understood there was a story behind that sentence. One connected to Claire, the woman in the photograph, and the reason Ethan chose a quiet life instead of a powerful one. Why did you leave? She asked. Ethan looked at the old letters. Because sometimes staying in a place means losing the people who matter most. Victoria had no answer. For years, she had believed ambition required sacrifice. She had accepted that relationships, family dinners, and personal happiness were things powerful people gave up. But Ethan seemed to have chosen something different. He had walked away from recognition to protect the people he loved. Before Victoria could ask another question, her phone rang. It was the chairman of Whitmore Holdings. She answered immediately. His voice was tense. Victoria, where are you? Why? Because someone accessed your father's private files last night. Victoria looked at Ethan. The timing was impossible to ignore. Who? She asked. There was a pause. Then the chairman answered. Someone who knew Ethan Calloway would eventually bring the truth back. Victoria slowly lowered the phone. The mystery was no longer only about her father's past. Someone else was still protecting the secret. And now they knew Victoria had found Ethan. Victoria Whitmore returned to Boston that evening with a question she could not ignore. For the first time in her life, she was not trying to protect her family's reputation or secure her company's future. She was trying to understand the man her father had trusted more than anyone knew. Inside her office on the 42nd floor of Whitmore Holdings, she placed the old photograph beside the letters from Richard Whitmore. The city lights reflected against the glass walls, but Victoria barely noticed them. Her entire world had always been built on certainty. Numbers had answers. Contracts had answers. Business decisions had answers. But Ethan Calloway was a question her father had left behind. She opened the first letter again. Ethan, you saved more than my company. You saved the people who depended on me. I will never forget that. Victoria read the sentence several times. She had spent years hearing stories about her father's success. She knew about the acquisitions, the expansion, and the billions of dollars created under his leadership. But nobody had ever told her about the man behind those achievements. The next morning, Victoria called her company's legal department and requested every archived document connected to Whitmore Holdings 12 years earlier. Hours passed. Then an email arrived. The files were incomplete. Important records were missing. Victoria stared at the message. Missing records were not accidents. Someone had wanted parts of the past to disappear. That afternoon, she returned to Ethan's town. This time, she did not arrive with suspicion. She arrived with respect. Ethan was outside the workshop repairing a wooden table while Lily sat nearby, finishing her homework. You came back, Ethan said. Victoria nodded. I found out someone removed records about you from my company archives. Ethan was quiet. I was hoping you would not have to learn this way. Learn what? Victoria asked. Ethan wiped his hands and looked at her. That your father's biggest mistake was trusting the wrong people. Victoria listened as Ethan explained what happened 12 years earlier. Richard Whitmore had been preparing a major expansion that would change the future of the company. Ethan was one of the engineers who helped create the technology behind that expansion. He was not an employee who simply followed instructions. He was one of the people who built the foundation. But when someone inside the company attempted to take control of the project, Ethan discovered information that could expose the truth. Instead of fighting publicly, Richard asked Ethan to protect the evidence until the right time. Why did he trust you? Victoria asked. Ethan looked at Lily. Because I was the only person who had nothing to gain from destroying him. The answer stayed with Victoria. Ethan had no desire for her company, no interest in power, no request for recognition. He had spent 12 years living quietly while holding information that could have changed his entire life. The money, Victoria said softly. The $1 million every month. It was not because he felt guilty, was it? Ethan shook his head. No, then why? Ethan looked toward the old letters. Because your father knew I was protecting something that belonged to his family. Victoria felt a chill of realization. What belonged to his family? Before Ethan could answer, a message appeared on Victoria's phone. It was from an unknown sender. There was only one sentence. Stop searching for answers you were never meant to find. Victoria showed Ethan the message. His expression changed immediately. Not fear. Recognition. Who sent this? She asked. Ethan looked toward the road outside the workshop. Someone who knows the truth is finally coming back. Victoria realized the secret was no longer hidden in the past. It was alive in the present. And whatever her father had tried to protect 12 years ago was now forcing them both to face the one thing neither of them expected. The truth about who really built Whitmore Holdings. Victoria Whitmore had faced difficult decisions before. She had negotiated billion-dollar acquisitions, defended her company during financial storms, and sat across from people who wanted to see her fail. But nothing prepared her for the feeling of knowing that someone had been watching her search for the truth. The message on her phone remained open. Stop searching for answers you were never meant to find. It was not a threat. It was a warning. And somehow, that made it worse. Victoria looked at Ethan Calloway. You know who sent this? Ethan did not answer immediately. He walked back into the workshop and closed the door behind them. The quiet sound of the lock reminded Victoria that Ethan had spent 12 years protecting something. "His name is Marcus Hale," Ethan finally said. Victoria recognized the name instantly. Marcus had been one of her father's closest advisors. He had remained with Whitmore Holdings after Richard's illness and helped guide the company through difficult years. "Marcus is one of the reasons my father's company survived," Victoria said. Ethan looked at her carefully. "That is what you were told." The words landed harder than she expected. For years, Marcus had been the person who explained complicated decisions to her. He had been the person her father trusted during his final years. The idea that he could be connected to the missing records felt impossible. "What happened 12 years ago?" Victoria asked. Ethan took a deep breath. "Your father discovered that important parts of the company were being controlled by people who cared more about personal gain than the future of the business." "Marcus?" Ethan nodded. He was not alone. Victoria looked away. She wanted to reject the idea. She wanted to believe there was a simple explanation. But every missing file, every hidden transfer, and every unanswered question pointed in the same direction. Ethan opened the cabinet again and removed a small envelope. "Your father gave me this before everything changed." Victoria looked at the envelope. "Why did you keep it for 12 years?" Ethan looked toward Lily, who was still quietly working on her drawing at the table. "Because your father asked me to wait until you were ready." Victoria frowned. "Ready for what?" Ethan handed her the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter. Her father's words were clear. "Victoria, if you are reading this, then you have found Ethan. Listen to him before you listen to anyone else." Victoria stopped. Her father had known this moment might happen. He had prepared for it. The letter continued. "Ethan is the reason you inherited a company instead of a crisis. He protected the work that built everything we have." Victoria looked up slowly. "Why did he never tell me?" Ethan answered quietly. "Because your father believed you needed to lead without carrying his unfinished battles." Victoria lowered the letter. For the first time, she saw her father not as a businessman, but as a father who had been trying to protect his daughter from a truth too complicated for her to understand. But before she could say anything, her phone rang again. This time, it was the Whitmore Holdings board secretary. "Victoria, you need to come back immediately." "Why?" she asked. The voice on the other end hesitated. "Marcus Hale called an emergency board meeting. He claims you have been investigating company secrets without authorization." Victoria looked at Ethan. The timing was clear. Someone was moving before she could uncover everything. "What else did he say?" she asked. The answer made her heart sink. "He said Ethan Calloway is not the man you think he is." Victoria ended the call and looked at the man standing across from her. 12 years of silence had protected a secret. But now that secret was standing between her family's past and her company's future. And Victoria realized she had reached the moment where she could no longer remain neutral. She had to decide whether to defend the empire her father built or the man who helped build it. Victoria Whitmore entered the Whitmore Holdings boardroom knowing that everything had changed. The same room where she had once announced billion-dollar decisions now felt unfamiliar. The people sitting around the table were no longer simply executives. They were people connected to a secret her father had hidden for 12 years. At the center of the room sat Marcus Hale, calm and confident, exactly as he had always been. "Victoria," Marcus said, "I understand you have been spending company resources investigating personal matters." Victoria placed the old letter from her father on the table. "I have been investigating missing company records." The room became silent. Marcus looked at the letter, then back at her. "And I assume Ethan Calloway gave you that." Victoria noticed the way he said Ethan's name. Not with surprise. With concern. "You know him," she said. Marcus leaned back. "I know what he did." Victoria waited for an explanation. Instead, Marcus opened a folder and placed several documents in front of the board. 12 years ago, Ethan Calloway walked away from a major project. Your father had to clean up the consequences. The board members looked through the papers. The story Marcus presented was simple. Ethan was an employee who left. Richard Whitmore was the leader who saved the company afterward. It was exactly the kind of story people wanted to believe because it was easy. But Victoria had learned something from Ethan. The truth was rarely simple. Why were his records removed? Victoria asked. Marcus paused. Just for a second. But Victoria noticed. Because they were no longer relevant. That is not an answer. Marcus looked at her carefully. You are letting emotions influence your judgment. Those words would have worked before. They were the words people used when Victoria was younger. They reminded her that powerful decisions required distance. But now she thought about Ethan standing in a small workshop, repairing old furniture while raising his daughter. She thought about a man who had $14 million available and still lived a quiet life because he believed the money belonged to a promise, not to him. No, Victoria said. I am finally looking at the facts. Marcus's expression changed slightly. It was the first time Victoria saw uncertainty. Later that afternoon, Victoria returned to Ethan's workshop. She found him outside helping Lily organize pieces of wood for a small project. The scene felt completely different from the boardroom. No pressure, no appearances, just a father and daughter building something together. They blamed you, Victoria said. Ethan looked up. I expected that. Why did you never defend yourself? Ethan smiled sadly. Because your father was trying to protect the company. And because sometimes proving you are right costs more than staying silent. Victoria looked at him. You lost everything. Ethan shook his head. No, I lost a position. I lost recognition. But I did not lose what mattered. Lily walked over holding a small wooden box she had made with her father. This is for you, she said to Victoria. Victoria looked surprised. For me? Lily nodded. Dad says people who are trying to fix things deserve something to keep. Victoria held the small box carefully. It was simple, imperfect, real. For years, people had given her expensive gifts hoping to gain something. This was the first time someone gave her something without expecting anything in return. That evening, Victoria made a decision. She called an emergency meeting with the board. But this time, she was not going to defend her family name. She was going to defend the truth. The next morning, the boardroom filled again. Marcus entered believing he had already won. Then Victoria placed a new folder on the table. Inside were the original project documents Ethan had protected for 12 years. She looked around the room and said, before we decide who Ethan Callaway is, we need to understand what he actually built. And for the first time in years, the truth was about to enter the room where it had been hidden. Victoria Whitmore stood at the front of the Whitmore Holdings boardroom with the original project documents in her hands. For years, this room had represented everything her family built. Power, success, control. But now, for the first time, Victoria understood that a company could have a beautiful public image while hiding painful truths underneath. Marcus Hale looked at the documents without changing his expression. Those files are incomplete, he said calmly. They do not tell the entire story. Victoria placed another folder on the table. You are right. They do not. The board members looked between them, waiting. Because someone removed the parts that explained Ethan Callaway's role. Silence filled the room. Victoria continued. Ethan did not abandon a project. He protected it. He created the foundation that allowed this company to grow. Marcus shook his head. You are trusting a man you barely know. Victoria looked directly at him. I am trusting evidence that was hidden for 12 years. The difference was clear. Marcus had spent years controlling the story. Ethan had spent years protecting the truth. The board reviewed the documents one by one. Old engineering reports. Original designs. Internal communications. Records showing that Ethan had been one of the key people responsible for the technology that transformed Whitmore Holdings into the company it became. The man they had forgotten was the man who helped create their future. Marcus finally spoke. Even if Ethan contributed, that does not change what happened afterward. Victoria looked at him. You mean the part where he disappeared? Marcus remained silent. Victoria already knew the answer. Ethan had not disappeared because he failed. He disappeared because he chose a different life. A life with his daughter. A life away from recognition and corporate battles. After the meeting ended, Victoria returned to Ethan's workshop. She found him sitting outside with Lily, watching the sunset behind the trees. It is over, Victoria said. Ethan looked at her. Is it? She sat down across from him. It was the first time she had ever been near him without trying to uncover something or prove something. I was wrong about you, she said. Ethan remained quiet. Victoria continued. I thought my father was helping you. I thought you were someone who needed his generosity. But you were the person who helped my father build everything. Ethan looked down. Your father believed people should be valued for what they do, not what they own. Victoria felt those words deeply. She had spent years surrounded by people measuring success through money and influence. Ethan had shown her another way. Why did you never come back? She asked. Ethan looked toward Lily. Because my daughter needed a father more than a company needed an executive. Victoria understood then. The money was never the important part. The promise was never about wealth. It was about protecting a family. Over the following weeks, Victoria worked to correct the damage caused by years of hidden decisions. She restored Ethan's name in the company records. She publicly acknowledged his contribution. She made sure the truth was no longer buried. But Ethan did not return to the company. He did not ask for a position or a title. He simply continued building furniture with Lily beside him. Victoria visited often. At first, she came because she wanted to make things right. Then she came because she wanted to be there. One evening, Lily handed Victoria another small wooden box. "You made one for me before," Victoria said. Lily smiled. "Dad says people who fix things need reminders that some things are worth keeping." Victoria held the box and realized something had changed. She had spent her whole life building an empire. But Ethan had built something she never knew she needed. A place where she was not a CEO, not an heir, just Victoria. And for the first time, that felt like enough. Months passed after the truth about Ethan Calloway finally came into the light. But Victoria Whitmore discovered that changing the past was easier than changing the way people felt about it. The world knew Ethan's name now. The company records showed his contribution. The board acknowledged the work he had done 12 years earlier. But Ethan remained exactly the same person he had always been. Every morning, he opened his small workshop, prepared breakfast for Lily, and spent the day creating things with his hands. He never asked for a larger house, a company position, or public recognition. Victoria often wondered how someone who had helped build a billion-dollar empire could be so content with a quiet life. One evening, she found the answer while watching Ethan help Lily finish a school project. "Dad, do you think people can fix everything?" Lily asked while painting a small wooden bird. Ethan smiled. "Not everything can be fixed the way it was before, but sometimes you can build something new that becomes even better." Victoria stood near the doorway and listened. Those words stayed with her because she understood them more than anyone. She had spent years trying to protect the company her father left behind, but she had forgotten that companies were built by people, not just numbers. She had forgotten that success without connection could still feel empty. Over time, Victoria became part of their lives in a way she never expected. She helped Lily prepare for school presentations. She learned that Lily preferred strawberry pancakes on Saturdays and always saved the last bite for her father. She learned that Ethan never drank coffee after noon because it affected his sleep. She learned small things that had nothing to do with business, but everything to do with family. Ethan noticed the changes too. Victoria no longer arrived with questions or documents. She arrived simply because she wanted to spend time with them. One afternoon, as they sat outside the workshop, Ethan handed Victoria a small wooden box. "You made these for everyone else," Victoria said with a smile. "Now it is your turn." She opened the box and found a carefully carved wooden heart inside. It was simple, but every detail showed patience and care. "Why this?" she asked. Ethan looked at her. "Because you spent a long time protecting a company. I thought you deserved something that reminded you to protect yourself too." Victoria looked down at the gift, remembering the woman she used to be. The CEO who believed weakness meant asking for help. The daughter who thought carrying every responsibility alone was the same as being strong. She realized Ethan had never tried to change her. He had simply shown her another way to live. Years later, people would still talk about the decisions Victoria Whitmore made as CEO. They would remember how she rebuilt Whitmore Holdings with honesty and respect. But the most important decision of her life was never written in a business report. It happened in a small town, beside a wooden workshop, when she chose to stop chasing everything she thought she needed and finally accepted what she had been missing all along. Ethan never became a different man. Victoria never stopped being a powerful woman. They simply discovered that strength did not have to mean standing alone. And Lily, the little girl who unknowingly connected two families, finally had the one thing she always wanted: a home filled with people who chose each other every day.